Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Founder Talks. So this week, we're changing things up. I'm the host. Jack can take a break. I know Sean's been doing a lot of the work too, so you guys can take a break. And this week's topic is going to be staying motivated. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this in this group is, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. And they're very excited by whatever it is that they're trying to get from entrepreneurship. For some people, it's money. For some people, it's freedom. Or some people, it's just, the change they want to see in the world. And the reality ends up being very different. And there's countless videos on the startup journey and the ups and downs of life. But one of the key questions I think that I had in my head throughout my journey has been like, well, when everything's going wrong, and it could be like your business is failing, or it's, there's a downturn, or maybe you're pivoting, how do you, focus on why you started in the first place? And if your reason for starting it was not solid, then you will get demotivated, at the first opportunity and leave. And then you're going to regret ever trying in the first place. And so, I wanted to get different perspectives from other founders, and of course, share my own as well, because I think it'll help anyone that's either in that situation right now or is thinking about starting a startup. And then you can kind of do a check to see, hey, am I doing this for the right reasons? Because it's certainly not going to be rainbows and butterflies all the way through. So to start with, maybe we can just go around and talk a little bit about why did you start the startup that you did? Or if you're in the process of it, what made you start it? Why do you want to do it? There's plenty of interesting, well-paying jobs in the world that, a lot of people have fun doing. Why choose the startup life? Anyone want to jump at the opportunity and say their piece? Let's see, who's the most motivated today?
I could jump in here. So for me, athletics is something that I'm very passionate about because it's something that I didn't have when I was growing up. So it was something that I actually sucked at. And so then I focused on education, and education was where I felt myself really grow, and going through undergrad, going to law school, and then ultimately going to a high-paying job in the law firm. I realized that I wasn't growing quickly enough in the law firm, whereas when I would work out with friends, when I ran my first marathon, and like since training every day, as I've tried to like work out every day, I can immediately see improvements. So I think for me, athletics is a way that the input matches the output, and that to me keeps me going, even though it's not like a outsized output immediately. It's like over time, it's growing and compounding itself. So for me, it's just the passion for health and fitness and the ability to connect with other people who are also passionate about that. I tend to get motivated from people who have made it in that industry, and I always use that as my foundation.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's interesting what you said about athletics actually applies to entrepreneurship for a lot of people. It's like, if you try really hard in your job, you might get a 5% pay bump. But, in entrepreneurship, everything good that happens is your input. And of course, everything bad that happens is also your input. So it's kind of correlated, I guess, the same way as athletics in many ways.
Yeah, put in the time, get the results.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. So that's one thing that I'm going to try to categorize each of them, and I know we'll have overlaps, but from all the founders I've met and been friends with, they fall into these categories. And I think I would categorize yours as just the change I want to see in the world. Like, I want athletics to be fun and engaging for people, and it's awesome, and more people should share my passion.
Definitely. I think one other thing I would say is like, the reason why I'm doing it is because of the kid that I know I was back then, thinking that I couldn't. And like, to me, this is a way to motivate that kid that I was when I was younger.
Mm, that's pretty cool. Anyone want to go next? I could go next. So I think for me, I'd worked a job as well before starting in the startup journey. But I think even before I had my first job, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my philosophy was, and this was a little silly in hindsight, but I think it's still true for the most part. Maybe it's not 100% true. It's the fact that, you want to be able to use your time in the most impactful way possible. Time is a limited resource. And what makes me happy is, after a long, hard day, I can say, hey, every single ounce of energy that I spent was for a purpose that aligns with my goal or my values or whatever else it is. And that's practically impossible to do in a corporate job. It doesn't matter if you're working at a small company, a big company. At the end of the day, there's 50% or more of it is going to be things that don't make sense, or things that maybe don't align with where you want to go in life, or what you want to be doing for the world. Not to say they're bad things, but it's a trade-off. And if that's something that really irritates you, like it did me, when I was at Google, it just irritated me that I had to spend hours like writing this report that nobody's going to read, or even if people read it, it's never going to see the light of day. And I'm kind of doing theatrics and I'm trying really hard, but it's not really going anywhere. Or maybe working on something that, my boss told me or some executive told that we need to do this, and I don't really believe in it. Can't necessarily just quit your job, every 6 months or whatever it is. And entrepreneurship is a way where, for better or for worse, you get to focus on the things that you think are important. And sometimes that means you make mistakes and you end up in places that are not great, but then you learn and you change. But at the end of the day, you can still say, hey, I thought, what I was doing was the best for my time and my money and my energy. And so, I've never been happier in terms of career satisfaction, even though I'm earning way less and maybe impacting much less people.
Yeah, I can build on that. I really like the point about alignment. I think that's a primary motivator for me as well. So alignment between what value I can give to the world with what I can enjoy doing sustainably every day. Alignment between where I want to go in the future, in the long term, with what I can create value immediately right now in the short term. For in terms of like a personal story for me, being also at the law firm, like I saw like the people who really enjoy being a lawyer resonates very strongly with that professional identity, especially in litigation. Like you see yourself as, the guy who goes into court, wears the, power suit and, makes the eloquent, oral argument, and wins the case. For me, I've always kind of saw myself more of a builder. Like I wanted to build products. I wanted to make some kind of a permanent change rather than deliver services on a continuous basis. What I'm more passionate about for me is less of becoming like a master, like a master set of skills around delivering this particular service, but rather being able to permanently change the status quo through with what I'm doing now, like which is creating software that completely changes how people can approach the delivery of legal services.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, what's interesting about what you said is, you didn't mention patents, you didn't mention law directly, right? So it's like your motivation is really about building products, and you just happen to be doing Patent Pal because that aligns with your skill set and your background. But the core motivation is actually not the actual patent process, unlike someone else like Sean, who's like, no, it's got to be athletics. That's what I really care about. So that's interesting. Like, there's a lot of diversity in why people start companies. That's always interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I can share. And everything that everyone has said really resonates with me. And Zorzar, I was like you, where I think I always knew that eventually I was going to build something. For me, it didn't necessarily have to be a full-blown startup. It could just be something that I'm doing on the side. But I've always had an entrepreneurial like tendency. And I think the reason why I'm so attracted to the whole startup world and whatnot, it's really two reasons. The first one is I've always been kind of obsessed with just making things better. No matter what situation or place I was in, I'm always like, okay, like how can that be better? How can this system be better? How can that process be better? And then coupled with that, the other reason as to why I'm so interested in the startup world is my strength is ideation. So when you're someone who's constantly thinking about how to make things better and you have all these ideas of how to make it better, I think those two traits really lend themselves to like making someone want to build something, right? So yeah, that's kind of where I guess I've ended up where I'm at here with you guys.
That's cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's hard to contain a creative mind in a corporate environment.
For sure.
Well, what about you, Aaron?
Well, growing up, I think I spend most of my time on two things. One is gaming, especially competitive gaming. And the other is reading these stories about other successful entrepreneurs. We call them entrepreneurs. How they build their businesses or their key contributions. People like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and a bunch of other names that I can't mention all of them. And I think what I learned is I want to do two things. One is something that continuously build value over time in a way such that I'm responsible for this thing and I get the most out of it. And something that accumulates a lot of value based on my contribution and based on the journey. And another is I enjoy the challenges, especially when you are just starting up, getting exposed to many things rather than being uber focused on one thing.
Yeah, that's an important one. I think similar to kind of what Em said, like it's about getting bored, right? If you're just kind of focused on one thing and you have a creative mind and all sorts of skills, you're like, hey, I can't use any of these other ones. I'm just kind of utilizing this one skill, and that gets boring pretty quickly, I think. Awesome, cool. Well, good to hear you guys' perspectives. Certainly different than mine, but always interesting to hear new perspectives. Now I want to ask a different question, and this one is, to provide the context, and I'll probably start with the answer because it's a little vague, but having like a grand motivation, like for me, like, oh, like aligning my time with value sounds great in theory, and it is the motivating factor for why I started, but I don't get up in the morning and that's my first thought in my head, aligning value with my time. Like that's not what I'm shouting at the mirror every morning. And the challenge is like,
what do you shout at the mirror?
Probably, about some bug or something. Every day it's new. But I think, it's important to then also understand, okay, you have this long-term motivation, but what is actually propelling you every single day to work on your startup? Because, it's hard. There's a lot of things you're doing that are frustrating and difficult and new. And having this grand 10-year, 20-year vision doesn't really help in those moments where you're like, I need to do this now and ship it, tomorrow. And so I'd love to hear your guys' perspective. What is the thing that on a day-to-day basis motivates you? And I'll start with myself. I think for me, when I get up in the morning, the first thought in my head is, depending on like what phase of the products/startup cycle I'm in, it's either like, oh, I'm really going to close that customer today, and I just got to send this email or got to like hop on this call, and all of a sudden there'll be money in my bank account. And that's like a really highly motivating thing for me, that I was like, all right, I got to go. Or if it's not about a sale, maybe there's like a feature launch that I know people have been asking for, and I'll be like, oh, I got to ship that feature today, and everyone's going to be so happy when they see it, and they've been asking for it, and that gives me a lot of, like, I guess, a dopamine rush every morning. And for that, it's, even if the day seems long and I have meeting after meeting after meeting, I'm just waiting for that dopamine hit at some point in the day. So that's it for me. What about you guys? You guys have anything that you look forward to on a day-to-day basis, or even a week-to-week basis in some cases? Tough
I
crowd.
think I can go. We're so shy here. I think, yeah, I think there's like a lot of upside that's kind of waiting closer to the end of the journey that gets me really excited. The product kind of builds on itself. The more we develop the core technology, the faster development actually goes. And I'm already starting to see that with the code stack that we have. Because like with a lot of product development, it's like building the tools first, and then once you have the tools, then you use tools you build to build the product. And alongside that, I think, from one perspective, I call it like strategic ignorance. But from another perspective, for me at least, like I don't know where it comes from, but like I have a really deep conviction that the vision that I want to bring the world is inevitable. And it's just a question of whether I'm the person who's going to bring it or someone else will. And so there's that sort of absolute certainty that this is the product that needs to happen in the world. And then absolute fear that I might not be the person to do it. Right? And I think the two kind of really drives me through the day.
I like that. You have both carrot and stick. That's awesome.
Yeah, so Zarzar, Jack, I like hearing about your perspectives because you guys are both so much further along than I am in terms of where I'm at in the startup journey. I'm so early, right? I'm still in that market research phase. But I like hearing what you guys had to say because it gives me something to look forward to. But in terms of me, it's not so much motivation. I just gave myself the goal to stay curious. And I think that's what's pushing me because I can't think too many steps ahead because I don't even know exactly ultimately what my product is going to be or what my service is going to be. Right. And who knows if I'm actually even going to end up building something. Maybe like throughout this research, I'll learn, okay, actually like this was a cool process, but this isn't exactly what I want to build, right? So I just told myself, so instead of letting all those thoughts and questions overwhelm me, I just told myself right now, your goal is just to be curious and really learn as much as you can and take it from there. So that's what I've been focusing on.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think being curious is like a necessary trait for a startup, but I've never quite heard anyone put it into words like you did. It's like, that's your goal. That's all you're doing. There's no like end action item. It's just be curious.
Yeah. And the other reason why I've kind of been making that my mindset is because I know that even if I do build something and I'm like working really hard at the product, like there's going to be so many pivots. And I feel like unless I'm still curious about the problem or curious about the process, like it's going to be so easy to feel defeated. So I guess in some ways I'm also mentally preparing myself for that and trying to figure out how am I going to go through those tough times like you mentioned.
I find this so fascinating, like just contrasting the last two answers. Like you're saying, I know I'm going to be wrong and I'm going to have to pivot. And then you have Jack, who's like, I have absolute conviction. Love it. It's like, this is what it is to be an entrepreneur. There's no like formula. There's all these different ways you can approach it. It's great.
Yeah, which actually reminds me, in AI research, DeepMind actually found a AI that has curiosity as its ultimate reward actually perform the best in many of those tasks.
Interesting.
Yeah, as defined by number of surprises, the number of times you get it wrong.
Well, that's cool. Wonder if that's the human mind's reward function as well.
Except sometimes the agent gets stuck in front of a TV, just constantly watching new stuff coming out of the TV.
When you hack the reward system.
I wonder if that's like a early form of a sense of humor for AI. Every time you get a surprise,
What about you, Sean?
Yeah, so I think I would say I'm driven by improvement and inspiration on both sides. So I'm inspired when I see what people can accomplish, and that makes me want to see what can I do. And if I can do that, then other people can do it. And it's like lighting a fire that spreads to everybody. So I think that's one of my big motivations when I wake up. I'm like, all right, like running is my focus with athletics, and I'm building up from that. So every day that I feel like I run and then I connect with the community there, I feel like there's somebody there who is also building on top of that. Where like I see my friends run, I see like Jack goes running early in the morning, and I'm like, all right, I have to go running too. And then I see like more people around the world, and there's a really strong connection within that community. And I think sports itself is one of the industries where people can push themselves and see results immediately, versus in technology, you're constantly learning, but it's also very tricky at the end. You don't know if like this is ultimately gonna work or not, but why not take the shot? That's the thing. How can you get more people to just think that way? Like take a shot at the goal.
That's interesting. So it's almost like a responsibility you have. You're like, hey, if I
Yeah.
can do it, I can motivate others, and like,
Yeah.
I'll have to get up, because if I don't, all these thousands of other people are not going to get up.
I mean, I love like The Rock. So like The Rock to me, I see him doing what he does, and like, man, like he really just motivates a ton of people. And I'm not sure if you've seen some of the videos where some of his fans get to meet him. They like cry because they're just like thank you, you changed my life.
Wow, that's powerful. So are you going to become The Rock one day?
No.
Am I going to cry when I meet you?
Just me.
All right, last but not least, Aaron.
Oh, I got pretty motivated when we close the customer or thinking about when we can sell the company. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself too much. No, but I remember it really depends depending on what I'm doing right now, what the company is doing at the time. I remember in the early days, I get pretty excited when we get recognition or we made something work. People feel happy. People express their gratitude, even when they found, okay, our stuff actually helped them a lot. This confirmation or recognition from the broader community actually kept us pretty motivated, especially the team. And then over time, we started to have more people, and watching people doing great work, that's satisfying.
Yeah.
And even occasionally some investors or bigger people from bigger company want to put money in or just buy it. But I guess after a while, we started to think more into the actual values that we bring, and rather than following the hype. Like what impact do we actually create? What if we just disappear tomorrow? And would it even matter? I think under that, we started to make better decisions and started shutting down products to make sure we are doing the right thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think one thing you said that was interesting is there's like two types of motivators, extrinsic ones and intrinsic ones. I think we all kind of touched on them. And I think for me, at least, I'm definitely on the extrinsic side. Like I need a customer to acknowledge that what I'm building is useful, and then I get very happy. I think some of the other answers here were very much intrinsics. Like I just get up and I'm motivated, and I need to like act on that motivation. So I find that pretty interesting too. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. I know it's very personal to everyone, but thanks for sharing and providing details there. So, yeah.
Follow-up question.
Please.
So you just mentioned extrinsic motivation and how powerful of a motivator that is for you. So how have you dealt with moments when you're not getting that extrinsic motivation?
Yeah, so that actually leads very, very well into my next question that I was going to ask, which is what has been the lowest point in your startup journey, and how did you deal with it? And it's an emotional thing to share for many people, so we're not going to go around necessarily, but anyone can just volunteer if they want to chat about it. But since you asked me the question, I'll go ahead and answer for myself. I think for us, it was when we first started this company, Zinc, last year, we were really focused on this vision of helping people have better meetings. And it was a really difficult problem that we thought we had a solution for, and we had a lot of people that were interested in using it and they resonate with the problem. But the problem was that it would have taken a long time, and it would have taken a lot of different expertise to actually solve it. And by that, I mean, there's the psychological factor about it, both from an individual psychology, but also organizational psychology. There's obviously the technical pieces around it. And then, the different incentives in an organization. Like, there's just so many moving pieces that what we had built, didn't solve it right away. And so we had this period of months where we didn't close a single sale. Nobody told us that, hey, my meeting went great because of you. And there was just no confirmation that what we were doing made any sense. And that was really, really hard. And, spoiler alert, we pivoted, but that was very difficult for us to recognize because, kind of like Jack, we were like, hey, this has to exist. This problem has to get solved in the world, and like somebody's going to come and solve it. And we were stuck in that loop for a while, and we were like, we just got to crack the code. And once we crack the code, everything will be great. But, the code wasn't going. And what ended up forcing us out of that situation was, I would say, artificial constraints. And that was like by the time we joined YC. And in YC, you kind of have to give an update, every week, every 2 weeks. And it has to be different than your last update. And the fear of us coming, 2 weeks later with the same problem of like, hey, we still haven't solved how to do meetings well, was high, even though it was like, didn't matter who's YC, right? They already invested in you, they don't care. But that kind of forced us to start thinking differently, being like, hey, there's no way we're going to solve this in 2 weeks. Maybe we should think of something else. And that's how we kind of gotten out of it. And I would say that that's kind of the advice I would give too for anyone who's stuck in that place where there's not a lot of extrinsic motivation coming in. Try to reevaluate like whether you really want to go down this path. Could we have solved that meeting problem? Maybe, but certainly I wouldn't be the right person to do it. I don't have the patience for that. I would rather build a business where I'm getting that extrinsic motivation faster. And so, targeting incentives where I get that feedback very quickly is important for me. And that's how I want to build my startup. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Anyone else want to share their story?
Yeah, for me, there were multiple points. I remember when we had no money and I had lots of credit card debt because of the startup. But I don't think that's the worst part, because eventually, like, there are one or another, some money always came in, whether it's a grant or some angel investor. Somehow it's solved.
You got to tell me how you do that, man. I want some.
One way or another, money will come.
or you just sell your product or service it, like people pay you to solve problems. But so the worst part, what I remember, was when you spend months, or even close to a year to build something, and nobody ended up using it. That's even worse than running out of money, because that most likely is telling you, okay, you screwed up and what you did was totally wrong. And then it got you to think about, okay, what exactly did I do wrong? And initially, you might even be angry with the users or the market, trying to blame it on someone else. But what I learned was, okay, if nobody's using it and the result is different from expected, there's something wrong with us. We could have tested it sooner than later, we could have like talked to more users. We could have like listened to some people who some of the criticisms who said, okay, this is not going to work. People probably don't care, or the market is too small. Because sometimes this feedback came from potential investors who didn't invest, and you would think like they are just finding an excuse not to invest you. But actually, in fact, more often than not, it's actually the truth. And
so how did you actually deal with that moment where you launched this thing and like you realized actually this isn't what the market wants?
Oh, you always give it more time.
Yeah.
Then at some point you realize the problem is not time, or your ability to in marketing or sales. Your tech doesn't suck, but nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question is like, why didn't you just give up at that? Like, that's pretty demotivating, man. Like, you spend a year on something and you're like, wow, nobody's ever going to use this. Like, how did you deal with like the emotional component?
I guess I only spent the maximum I spent on was maybe 6 months, on something. After 6 months, I gave it maybe another 3 months or a few more months to, try to eliminate the possibilities that it's just be lacking some skill or didn't do the right thing, or maybe just throw in some Facebook ad or Google ad to see, okay, to make sure, okay, it's just people don't know about it. But well, how do I handle the eventual truth? I guess that's your question. But people don't want it. I guess like after giving it enough time, there's like, 6 months you try doing some marketing, next month you try doing some ads, the months afterwards you try doing some interviews or TV presentations, and next month you try some partnership, and none of them work. You already got enough time to absorb and really think about what went wrong. So it's not like instant failure, instant hit.
You cushion the impact.
Yeah. You're giving yourself enough time to figure out, okay, how do you salvage the situation? How do you reposition the thing and use that as a foundation to build something that may work.
Right. Makes sense. Cool. Thanks for sharing, Aaron. It must have been very hard for you. But glad to see you're in a better place now. You have the scars to prove it.
I have something that I want to share as well. So I definitely get impacted by externals a lot. One of the big things at the start of my entrepreneurial journey was just family not accepting it. So for me, this was really difficult because my family immigrated to the US. I was born here. Everything that they taught me is you go to school, you become a doctor or a lawyer, and then you get the job, then you get a family, you settle down, you're set. Like that's what you should be happy with. Right. And to me, that wasn't happiness. Like being in the law firm environment, like you can ask Jack, you can ask like a lot of friends, and I think a lot of us had this experience as well of like wanting more. So I wasn't happy, and that decision to transition out was something that wasn't supported by family and some friends who just didn't understand it as well. So that was difficult, and I tended to block people out that I thought weren't in that supportive mindset. So it was basically people outside of Silicon Valley, like didn't understand it. But yeah, I think it's interesting because it comes back to what Jack said about conviction. Do you believe in the idea? Do you believe in yourself? And what's the type of life that you want?
Mm.
And I would constantly think about that because like I would hear what they were saying, but then I would be like, I'm not going to be happy if I do that.
Mm.
And I think I really struggled with that, but then coming out of it, I felt stronger because it made me realize that on this journey, there are going to be moments where you're alone and you really need to find that community that does support you.
Mm.
Um,
So what would you say, here's your The Rock moment. What would you say to someone out there listening right now that, you know, maybe they floated the startup idea and their parents are like, no way, we didn't, you know, pay $100,000 per school so you could go quit. What would you say?
So I think this is just from personal experience, so everybody's family and situation will be different, but your startup idea doesn't necessarily need approval or permission from your family members who may or may likely not be your customer, right? So at the end of the day, all your family cares about is for you to be happy and successful, but they think that you're taking an extreme risk to do it. So I think what I would say to someone who's just starting out and dealing with a similar scenario is just go out there and win. Like, there are going to be people who say no, and some of the closest people to you may say no. That doesn't matter. Like, find the people that say yes. And like I think for us, like this community and then other members of founders are really important because founders understand. Yeah.
That's really interesting because, you know, I think statistically we know that immigrants tend to start more companies than non-immigrants. And I'm an immigrant as well. And I have the exact same experience as you where, you know, my family does not understand, why would you quit your Google job? I mean, like we did all this so that you could do this.
Right.
And so I wonder, like, what is that dynamic? Is it that we saw our parents, you know, go an order of magnitude better life, and then we want to, you know, take another order of magnitude? Like what?
Jack has a really good point on this because we've discussed it several times. Jack, you remember when we went to the coffee shop, like what you explained to me about each generation?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure I stole this from somewhere else.
No, but still.
But yeah, like, I mean, the immigrant's life is difficult, right? It's you're in a new environment. There's a struggle. There are two immediate needs. One being like financial stability, and two being like prestige or like social respect, and you know, becoming a doctor or a lawyer or, you know, becoming a Google product manager, like that's, you know, instantly you have both. You have money and you have respect, right? And so it's very difficult, I think, for immigrant parents to understand why would we give that up, because that's what they worked so hard for. They sacrificed a lot so that their children would have that. Whereas I think for immigrant children, like it's not an uncommon pattern to see us first like kind of fulfilling that desire from that we inherit, and then kind of going forth and asking like, what's the next step for us?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the immigrant curse / blessing, whatever you want to call it. Awesome. Cool. So kind of also on theme, we talked a lot about what motivates us, but especially a lot of people that are either haven't started yet or are kind of in the early stages of thinking about doing a startup. I also wanted to expose kind of the reality of how hard it is too. And so maybe if someone wants to share, what are the things that really demotivate you when you're doing a startup? Like what is the thing that I'm sure nobody knew it when they were starting, but once you're kind of in the thick of it, you're like, man, this part really sucks. And I wish someone told me before. What are some of those things for you guys? And don't tell me there aren't any, because then I'm going to feel bad because I have some.
I think for me, like I knew this going in, but I still underestimated just like the impact of the initial social isolation. And that's going to be the case, at least it was for me, for quite a long time. Extending on what Shant was saying, a lot of your closest people will not understand what you're doing. I think I spent way too long trying to explain pattern automation to my folks. There was a language barrier too, so it was very difficult. But yeah, like there was quite a lot of roller coaster waves, just in terms of like like building that initial momentum, but like finding it difficult to sustain it when you're kind of like in your bedroom and coding by yourself. That was a big component for me.
Makes sense. Yeah, people are talking about it more now. I think it didn't used to be the case, but yeah, isolation part is a big deal because you also don't necessarily have time to like, go camping every weekend or something, which is, a lot of the ways you build relationships in some cases. So
yeah.
Anyone else? Or everyone
Yeah, I guess.
Motivated?
Anyone else want to go first?
No, go ahead, Aaron.
I guess for me the part is not really social isolation, but the part where people don't really understand for early stage founders, they don't have a lot of options, and they should really leverage whatever they have got and really appreciate that. Some people tend to think, especially those people who don't really understand entrepreneurship or startup life, tend to think, okay, now you're funded, you have a company, you have a lot of, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, you can even pay yourself big salary, go have lots of vacations. That's not, people think that way, and no matter how you explain it, people will always think that way. They just don't understand that's not, that's just a fantasy. Maybe in their imagination, that's the startup life in their imagination, but that's not the reality. And the reality is you would basically live on a $1 salary and have no weekend.
Yep, that is the reality. For I would guess 99% of founders, for at least at some point in their life.
Yeah, they would think like, okay, you can choose whatever holiday that you want to choose, but you really can't.
There's no choice. There's just no holidays.
Or who you want to work with, etc.
At least you can choose your Zoom background. That counts, right?
Oh.
Awesome. Anyone else? Anyone else demotivating?
I don't necessarily have something that's demotivating. I'm just not really there yet, to be honest. But I do have something that was surprising. But first, before I share it, just really curious, how long did it take you guys to actually go to market? So how long did it take for you to actually build something and then be out there?
Depending on what go to market means.
Let's just say actually selling to customers.
Only 2-3 months before, actually, like I tend to just spend a few weeks and build a very basic prototype, really ugly, and send it to some people I knew, ask for their opinion. If that's like the first stage of go to market, and then I refine maybe after a couple of months, I release it to a broader audience, announce it in social network, but not necessarily asking people to pay, because it really depends on the product. It can be a free to use stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about from ideation to prototype? How long did that take? Inception. So the point at which you first had an idea and then had your prototype, how long was that?
That's actually taking longer and longer. Initially, I tend to be that, okay, I have an idea, let's build it tonight. But over time, I started doing this. Okay, I have an idea, let's talk to someone. What do you think about it? And then doing some research, figure out the market, talk to some potential customers. That might take months.
Yeah.
And see, or even doing some surveys, see the reaction, build some, to do some mock-ups. Yeah, and I find the longer it is, the better. You don't have to like do it full time. Sometimes we had a idea, say middle last year, but we just kept it in the back of our mind, and sometimes occasionally talk about it in front of relevant people.
Okay.
Then eventually, when we started really building something based on idea, that's like beginning of this year.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think for us, it's going to depend on the product, right? If you have a more complicated product, it'll take longer to build. I tend to pick products that are really easy to build, probably because I want to build a complicated product, and I probably can't anyway. And so for us, we tend to keep it under 2 weeks if possible. So the first product we launched was just free. We weren't really charging customers, but I think we launched it in 2 weeks, and we just sat back and saw what happened. Like, it clearly wasn't going to be like a business. Maybe it'll become a business, but what we launched wasn't there.
Okay.
It was just a way for us to learn faster, I think. And now we kind of operate under the philosophy of launch before you have anything. And so I'll literally make a video and pretend like we have a product and try to close people. And that usually takes a week, sometimes a little more than a week. And if nobody responds, then we will make another video. If somebody responds, then we start building it, and then hope they close.
So it sounds very like iterative. And you guys are comfortable doing that.
Yeah, and it's not going to work for every idea. But if you have a very tractable problem and a very clear way of communicating, then I would suggest going as fast as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So, like basically launching before a product, are you thinking about building the community before and then giving them the product as well? Is that like part of the...
What do you mean by community? Do you mean like a freemium model type thing?
Either freemium or just like already having those early conversations and then establishing the relationship even before you have an MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, like you've already gone through the process, you have your MVP, but like in those early stages,
yeah, I think we did a lot of research for sure. We talked to a lot of customers and we talked to a lot of users. Almost none of them ended up becoming customers, actually, surprisingly, even though they informed the product. But I would say we didn't think of it as a relationship, but that's just the nature of the market that we're in, right? We're in B2B SaaS. There's like millions and millions and millions of businesses out there. We don't need to build a relationship with one particular customer. If we think what we're doing adds value, people will come. And that's what we found, is that people will just look at our website. And if you've looked at our website, there's not much there. And they'll contact us just based on that because there's some burning problem. And in fact, I would actually prefer that because, again, if you have like a product that's not, high value, or not value, but like high cost and long sales cycle type of thing, you want to make sure it's repeatable. And I feel like if I were to really like schmooze like one particular customer, get on their good side and like build something custom for them, yeah, they'll get on it, but that's not going to be any good test of whether that's marketable at scale. And so I actually try to keep things as like generic as possible, and as lightweight as possible. And then I know like, oh yeah, this is something that can actually take off. I'm not kind of deluding myself. And I have the same advice for like getting your friends to try stuff. I think it works in some cases, but not in other cases. And I'm only speaking on behalf of like my industry, which is B2B SaaS. Don't try this in healthcare. Don't try this in, other regulated industries or something like that. But to me, I think at the early stages, your biggest question is like, is this something that's going to work? And you want to remove any false positives, as much false positives as you can.
Okay, so that was all very helpful. And the point that I wanted to make was, well, my takeaway from everything that you guys shared so far is it takes a long time to actually find that product market fit. It's going to be an iterative process. And the fact that this is a long process was not necessarily like, surprise to me, but it was surprising to me that, well, initially I thought this is going to take me 3 months, but now I'm at a point I'm like, this can potentially take me 6 months, a year before I'm like making, any money at all, period. Right. So But I'm bringing this up because I had quit my job before I decided to do this. I didn't necessarily quit my job in order to do this, but I had already quit my job. And so if somebody came to me and they were like, I have this great idea, I want to build a company, etc., I would actually tell them, like, really spend some time thinking about how long this might actually take you and whether you are in a good financial position to just jump ship right away. So that's the point that I wanted to make. So not a demotivator per se, but something that maybe I would have thought about, or I would have thought a little bit more, if I was still in my job, I would have thought a little bit more about leaving than I had. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's all going to work out.
That's a good job.
Yeah, it worked out for me, and I left for really, really good reasons. I was really ready to leave at that point, so it doesn't really affect me that much. But if someone came to me and wanted advice, I would tell them, maybe start building it now when you do have a job, and really figure out your runway and all that stuff. Really make sure you're comfortable leaving. Because I've also seen some founders just have an idea, quit, build a team, and start building and doing all this stuff and trying to raise money, but they're just like moving too fast and like not really doing anything meaningful with what they're trying to build either, and not really able to raise money either.
Right.
So yeah.
I think that's a really good point, and people don't realize how much work it is for how long of a period of time it is. The advice I've heard is for co-founders, like everyone should have a 2-year minimum commitment. Anything less than that, and you're going to walk away before the startup has a chance to live. And from a personal perspective, if you're not willing to do whatever you're doing right now for the next 10 to 12 years, like don't even bother getting started, because that's the minimum time it would take for you, ideally, to go public, or even in some cases acquire. Anything less than that, like the startup is not done. You can't just walk away. It's not like a job where you just give your 2 weeks notice and walk away.
I would just kind of add a little bit of a caveat, because I think for people starting out, when they don't really know what they want, what they're doing yet, they don't have enough experience to understand what style of entrepreneur they are until they've actually been doing it. At least for me, it's often very tempting to take advice one way or another. And in the industry, there's like advice on both sides of it. I think there is the flip side of, I do think what Zerzar said was like really great rules of thumb, great general advice for most companies. But there is also like this sheer diversity in terms of like how founders have become founders, how they have succeeded, how they went to market, how they got their first customer, how they raised money, etc. One book I really like, Derek Sivers wrote about his journey. I think he first sold his software. It wasn't even sold, like he gave it to his friends to use after a year of building it. And the money only started coming in like tiny amounts, like the first couple of customers started coming in on his second year, right? And it was like this really slow growing exponential curve that by, year 10, year 15, that's where things started picking up. So, that happens as well. Like it really depends on the model. Like there's definitely the Silicon Valley default approach is like something that goes fast, right? Like we're talking about like 6 months, within 6 months, 2-week iterations, 2 months, go to market, and then, a couple of pivots. By 6 months, you've done 3 pivots, that definitely de-risks, does a lot of de-risking for most companies. There are also just a lot of founders who rely on that kind of relationship building approach, that organic growth, take care of your first customer, make them super, super happy, and they'll get you the second, third customer, and so forth.
Right. Yeah, I think part of that is also being hypothesis driven. Like, even in B2B SaaS, a company like Notion, which is wildly successful, they didn't do at all what I said. They sat, coding in their underwear in Japan for 2 years, I think, before they launched their first product, and they had 0 revenue. And it's a B2B SaaS company. And I think for them, it's like, they knew the world needs this, right? And it's like, they're so convinced that this is a better way of note-taking that they know they build it, people will come. And so in that case, you're like, yeah, build it. You have that much conviction, you should build it and not compromise. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the personal strengths and weaknesses of the individuals.
Right.
Some individuals are pretty good at marketing, and it doesn't make sense for them to build a bunch of stuff first, then market it.
Yeah.
So you can just market it in the very start and make a lot of money even before they build anything. Some other people are good at building stuff. Some people are good at certain specialized obscure skills. Maybe leverage that and make that a offer offer a service into a product to get started.
You are really good at fundraising.
That one is hard to get out of. Cool. Awesome. I know we don't have too much time. One final question would be, who has been a person, whether it's somebody personal to you or somebody famous, that's been the most influential to you in their journey? I know you mentioned The Rock. I don't know if that's your entrepreneurship journey or is that more of your athletic journey?
That's more athletic journey. I would say for the entrepreneurship journey, hands down, Naval Ravikant is amazing and connected to what we were just talking about. One of the concepts that he brings up is not only product market fit, but product market founder fit. So are you the founder to build this product for this market? And that's a combination of like many different things. Like you have the skills, you understand the industry, relationships, all of that. But yeah, I just love the way that he breaks down certain concepts, and he's also known as the angel philosopher. And I love philosophy, so the way he talks about it is like, yeah, highly recommend him. Definitely check him out and read his guide to wealth. It's at the top of his Twitter page.
Yeah, I've read that. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hard to say which one influenced me the most, but among all the biographies I've read, I think it's really I like the story of Bill Gates the most. Not because now he's the richest person, probably top 3 richest person, but about when he just got started. He was building software, which is very closely related to what I do. He never raised money. Except at one time when one of the famous VC just wanted to throw money at him, and he thought about, okay, we need some adult supervision and advice. So that's why he gave 5% to that VC for $20 million, and they don't need the money, they just let the money sitting in the bank. But I think 2 things I learned and influenced me the most from his story was, one, he knows how to leverage the most out of whatever he has. Like for example, the first deal that he had with that personal computing company who needed his compiler with Paul Allen, so he managed to get a licensing deal for a pretty good revenue share, and not giving up the IP. At the same time, he can even continue studying at Harvard until 6 months or a year later, he figured, okay, this is getting bigger, so he dropped out.
Right.
And second thing is he's really careful and really forward thinking with all the legal stuff that's embedded as part of the deal. For example, that deal, the same deal, he inserted certain clauses that says, okay, this company got to act in good faith, otherwise the license is non-exclusive. And it only paid off many years later when that company got acquired, and that acquiring company wasn't acting in good faith, basically trying to cut off Microsoft and kill Microsoft. And that clause got them out of that situation, and that's why they thrived. Otherwise, we probably would never heard of them.
Yeah. He had a lot of foresight for sure.
Whether you're a lawyer or not, read all your contracts.
Yeah.
His parents are lawyers.
Bill Gates' dad is also an attorney and one of the founding partners for K&L Gates. So like he had like it's in the family too. So he had an advantage of his dad being one of the top attorneys, I think.
Mm. Free attorney, free lawyer service for his company.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any last influential people anyone wants to mention before we close off for the week? All right.
I want to say,
Yeah.
I think I would say like your 5 closest friends are the most influential to you. So if you can establish a strong group, those people are going to give you more information than anybody else can.
Mhm.
And I think being able to share this type of information that we do with each other is very important and more impactful than if it comes from like a third party, you know. So I would say be very deliberate in choosing that close group, and then foster like a stronger relationship with everyone in it, because it adds a ton of value.
Yeah, I agree.
And just to add to that, I do think that there's so many great founders and a lot of inspiration out there. I agree with that. But to add to what Sean is saying, I think for me too, just what we're doing here is a lot more valuable to me, because we're giving each other insight and guidance and advice like real time when we're in the thick of going through things. There's something really authentic about that you may miss when you're reading a book written by or for someone with 2020 hindsight, right? Like who knows like what actually happened at that moment in time? Who knows what folks were really going through at that moment in time and how they were processing that information. Right. So not to say that what's out there isn't authentic per se, but I just feel like what we're doing here, like it's real, right? So yeah, I see a lot of value in that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much, guys, for sharing what were probably pretty personal and deep thoughts on this topic. And yeah, thanks, guys, for tuning in. And we hope to see you again next week, where we'll have a brand new topic and a brand new host.
Thanks, Zerzar.
Thank you, Zerzar.